The mission here at Alaska Airlines is creating an airline people love. We really care for our employees as well as all of our guests, whether you're talking with a contact center agent over the phone, you may be on an aircraft, checking in for a flight.
Alaska Airlines became the nation's fifth largest carrier after buying out Virgin America, and now it is unveiling a brand new look with special attention to how passengers experience a flight from their seats.
Alaska Airlines is one of the biggest airlines in the United States. Yet, the U.S. government shut down its operations for 4 weeks. This was not done because of financial reasons, but because lives were at stake. 2 different incidents almost took the lives of passengers, and the government had to intervene after the second one. What were these incidents that forced the government to shut down such a massive airline? Join us as we reveal the terrifying incident that caused the U.S. to shut down the Alaska airport. The Alaska Airlines Flight 558 incident. It began like any other flight. In the early hours of the morning, Alaska Airlines Flight 558 left Seattle for San Diego. At first, everything went well, and no one on board knew something was wrong. But soon after takeoff, something interesting happened that caught everyone's eye. From the left side of the plane, there was a strange shaking sound. Some people on the plane could tell something wasn't right, even though it wasn't very loud. People in the cabin could feel the plane shaking a little. One passenger said he heard a pop, and then the cabin began to shake. It wasn't clear what was going on at first. It became clear that parts of the engine cover were coming off when people looked out the window. The metal piece that covers the engine, called the cowling, had begun to come loose. Certain parts were flying off, causing concern among passengers. This is where things got interesting. It turned out that the pilots also saw it. They moved quickly, thanks to their more than 30 years of flying experience. They didn't stay put or try to keep going. They turned the plane around and attempted to get back to Seattle as quickly and safely as possible. Everyone just wanted to land at that point. It must have been very scary for the people who were stuck in a metal tube 1,000 feet up, having to watch engine parts fall off. The flight was far from peaceful, but the flight crew stayed calm the whole time. They told people what was going on and followed safety rules. It was easy for the pilots to bring the plane back to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport and land it. Still, it wasn't over yet. More of the engine cover fell off as the plane touched down. A video recorded by some passengers shows pieces flying off near the airport. Later, the airline acknowledged that the cowling had come off while the plane was landing. There were 176 people on board, plus 6 crew members. Although they were all safe when the plane landed. After what they went through, it's easy to understand why the airport was warned. In case of an emergency, there were people on the taxiway ready to help. It's surprising how quickly it all happened. The plane took off at 7:36 a.m. and landed at 8:04 a.m. That means it only took less than 30 minutes from takeoff to emergency landing. A normal trip turned into something you'd never want to go through in that short time. Even though no one was hurt, the whole thing was a reminder of how fast things can go wrong in the air. One small vibration turned out to be a sign of something much bigger. The plane was immediately taken out of service, and Alaska Airlines said it wouldn't fly again until its safety team figured out exactly what went wrong. The airline praised the pilots and crew for how they handled everything.
One of the hero pilots aboard that Alaska Airlines plane that had a door blow out mid-flight in January is now speaking out for the first time tonight about those terrifying moments. CBS's Chris Van Cleve has the exclusive interview.
They said the team stayed calm and professional throughout the incident. Passengers were rebooked on another flight a couple of hours later and continued their trip to San Diego. But you can bet this is a flight they won't forget anytime soon. The Federal Aviation Administration and airline investigators tried to find out what really happened. As they grounded the plane, a Boeing 737-900ER, until they identified the problem. These kinds of engine cover failures don't happen often, and when they do, they're taken seriously. To prevent a repeat, engineers inspected that plane and likely others in the fleet. As for the airport, this kind of thing is precisely why they train for emergencies. Crews moved into position when they received a call about a plane returning with a potential engine problem. Thankfully, they weren't needed beyond checking things over. The airport's partial shutdown to address this shows how serious it was. However, after this incident, Alaska Airlines found itself dealing with another, more terrifying one. Let's find out what it was. The Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 incident. Nobody on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 thought anything unusual was going to happen that day. The plane had taken off from Portland, Oregon, on what was supposed to be a routine trip down to Ontario, California. It was a Boeing 737 MAX 9, one of the newest jets in the sky. In fact, this specific aircraft had only been flying with Alaska Airlines for about 3 months, and it had already completed over 150 flights. Sure, there had been a few warning lights about pressurization problems in the days before the flight, but maintenance crews had done their checks and cleared it to fly. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary to the 171 passengers and 6 crew members on board. But just a few minutes after takeoff, everything changed. About 6.5 minutes into the flight, something terrifying happened. A large section of the plane's fuselage suddenly blew off mid-air. It wasn't a small crack or a window shattering. It was an entire panel, known as a plug door, ripping away from the side of the aircraft. The pressure inside the cabin dropped immediately. Oxygen masks fell from the ceiling. Passengers screamed, and strong winds rushed through the gaping hole. Items were sucked out of the cabin, including a teenage boy's shirt, and one mother had to physically hold on to her child to stop him from being pulled out. People sitting near the blown-out section were hit with freezing air and loud noise. Some described a cloud or mist rushing past their faces, and everyone was caught in panic and confusion. Passengers who were asleep woke up suddenly to the emergency, with some texting loved ones goodbye, fearing this was it. Seat 26A, the one right next to where the plug door came off, thankfully had no one in it. That empty seat may have saved a life. Even though it was complete chaos in those first moments, flight attendants tried their best to keep people calm and safe. But the noise inside the cabin was so loud that many passengers couldn't hear the instructions being shouted. Meanwhile, the pilots had to deal with more than just the blown-out fuselage. The cockpit door had slammed open because of the pressure change. A checklist flew out. One pilot's headset got yanked off. Still, they managed to stay in control and call in the emergency. The pilot radioed air traffic control and calmly said they needed to get down fast. Within about 20 minutes of takeoff, the plane made it back to Portland and landed safely. No one lost their lives, and only 3 people had injuries that needed medical attention. All of them were later cleared. But the experience was anything but ordinary. Some passengers later said they were still shaken and called it the most frightening thing they had ever been through. After 2 terrifying brushes with catastrophe, the government had no choice but to act as you'd see next. The US government shut down Alaska Airlines. After the door plug incident, the government had to take action. Imagine you're 16,000 feet in the air and part of the plane just rips off. That's not something airlines or the government can just shrug off. Right after the flight landed, Alaska Airlines decided to ground its entire fleet of MAX 9s, all 65 of them. At first, they thought 18 of those planes were ready to fly again because they had just gone through detailed maintenance. But that changed fast. Later that same day, the Federal Aviation Administration stepped in and issued an emergency order that grounded every single Boeing 737 MAX 9 with that same kind of door plug setup. It wasn't just Alaska anymore. United Airlines and Copa Airlines had to follow suit, and so did others around the world. Suddenly, the crisis wasn't just one airline's problem. It was everyone's problem. The plug that blew off? It landed in someone's backyard in Oregon. Just imagine that you're raking leaves and find part of an airplane. That's how bad it was. And the investigators were quick to start looking into what exactly went wrong. However, they immediately encountered a problem. The voice recorder in the cockpit had already been overwritten. These devices could only store 2 hours of audio, and since no one switched off the power after landing, all the crucial recordings vanished. That means whatever the pilot said during the event was lost. The investigators, from the National Transportation Safety Board, Federal Aviation Administration, and even the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Department of Justice, started digging into every piece of evidence they could get. The airline, Boeing, and Spirit Aero Systems, the company that built the plane's body, were all pulled into the investigation. It turned out this same aircraft had a warning light issue just a few days before the incident. 3 times in the weeks leading up to the flight, a fault light for cabin pressurization had gone off. It didn't stop the flights from continuing, but it was serious enough that Alaska Airlines restricted that plane from flying long trips over the ocean. Now, people were wondering if those warning lights had something to do with the blowout. While all this was going on, passengers were grounded across the country. Alaska Airlines had to cancel hundreds of flights over the next few weeks.
Alaska Airlines is canceling all of its 737 MAX 9 flights through at least Saturday. The airline said it's still waiting for documentation from Boeing and the FAA needed to start.
Even when they thought some planes were safe, they kept pulling them out of service just to be extra cautious. Flight cancellations stretched on for days, then weeks. By then, they were still calling off up to 150 flights a day. For a lot of travelers, it meant being stuck, delayed, or rerouted. For Alaska Airlines, it meant taking a massive financial hit. What made it worse was that inspections started turning up even more problems. Both United and Alaska said they found loose bolts during their checks, bolts that were supposed to keep that door plug locked in place. That discovery shook up the entire aviation world. If the same issue was showing up on multiple aircraft, it pointed to something much bigger, maybe a production or installation problem on Boeing's side. 4 weeks later, the Federal Aviation Administration finally gave the green light for a new inspection process. They told airlines they could bring the MAX 9s back into service, but only after each plane passed the inspection. Alaska started flying them again 2 days after this announcement. United followed the next day. But that wasn't the end of it. Boeing had to take responsibility. The company's CEO came out and said it was their mistake, a problem with quality control, plain and simple. Boeing agreed to pay Alaska Airlines $160 million to help cover the losses. They also let the airline return the damaged aircraft to Boeing, so Alaska didn't have to keep spending money storing or maintaining it. Across all the airlines affected, Boeing paid out over $400 million. In the end, the U.S. didn't just shut down Alaska Airlines for a few days, they grounded a big piece of the airline industry. It wasn't about blame or punishment. It was about stopping everything long enough to figure out what went wrong and making sure it never happens again. And for a lot of people who were on that flight or who got stuck because of the shutdown, it was a scary reminder that even with all the safety checks and systems in place, things can still go wrong. And when they do, the whole system has to come to a stop. From dealing with droughts to tackling floods and shortage in crop yields, farmers from all over the world have had to face one issue or the other as they carry out their day-to-day activities, with no limit to the challenges they could encounter on their farmland. It didn't come as a surprise to them when thieves started invading their fields. But amidst the chaos, one farmer decided to step up and put an end to the plague. What could have prompted this bold step? Join us as we uncover what this farmer did when thieves invaded his farm. Farmers at war with countryside thieves. A new report by the Country Land and Business Association, CLA, warns that police forces in England and Wales that cover large rural areas are in crisis and need more funding to fight back against the organized gangs of thieves in the area. The National Police Chiefs Council said forces were strengthening their response to rural crime that suddenly started plaguing the area. These findings by the CLA came after a Durham University report found there were 22 serious organized criminal gangs active in the countryside. Simon Porter, a farmer who farms 570 hectares near the village of Crondall in Hampshire, has been targeted by these thieves and violent gangs breaking onto his land for illegal racing and gambling on dogs chasing hares. But things soon took a different turn. As a farmer who also runs a vineyard, Porter told BBC the gangs of thieves were targeting farms for quad bikes and expensive tools, often ramming the roller shutters on storage sheds to break in. Due to these forceful entries and thefts, local farmers, like many across the country, started using mobile phone chat groups to warn each other of any suspicious activity, day or night. As farmers who have to leave work on their fields daily, they started to leave their phones on 24 hours a day, which placed them in a constant state of anxiety. Although the local beat officers were trying to do their best with the limited resources, the farmers were forced to take matters into their own hands. With the invasions getting more and more frequent, Porter had to install €10,000 worth of farm defenses, including 3-ton concrete blocks at entrances to his field to keep the gangs out. Although these fortified fences helped reduce the break-ins, it didn't exactly stop the incidents from occurring. So the farmers of Crondall Village held a meeting to discuss the next step forward without having to rely on the inadequate Hampshire constabulary. CCTV cameras were installed, and large lamps were mounted to shine over their fields at night. By the time the thieves returned, they were surprised to find the farmers ready and waiting for them. Making use of registered firearms, the farmers mounted a defense, forcing some of the gang members to flee the scene, while others surrendered due to support from the local police. So far, since the incident, there have not been any report of gang members invading farmlands in the village of Crondall, and other farmers have learnt of the importance of standing up for their right to protect and safeguard their properties. Just like the farmers of Crondall Village, other farmers have also started to fight off invaders on their farms. Let's dive deeper into their encounters and the outcomes. The eggs thieves in Ireland. A farmer turned up at the homes of the thieves he caught on CCTV stealing eggs from his farm and demanded them back after he tracked them down. Dunn's farm in Maynooth, Ireland, was targeted last Saturday by 2 men who took advantage of their honesty box, which allows people to take crates of pasture-range eggs and drop the money in the box. But owners Norman and Michael had installed CCTV and caught the pair red-handed as they made away with 9 boxes of eggs, 270 individual eggs in total, and 2 bags of spuds. The hooded pair parked on the road and made weak attempts to hide their faces during their heist. But Norman and Michael identified them and turned up at their house half an hour later. Here's where things start to get very interesting. The video captured by the camera showed the 2 men run over to the egg stand and snatch 9 boxes containing 30 eggs each and 2 sacks of potatoes. One wore a face mask, and the other tried to use his hood to cover his face as they ravaged the unmanned egg shop. The owners watched in horror about a few minutes later as the men made away with the boxes, satisfaction written all over their faces, but their smiles didn't stay on for long. Michael, one of the farm owners who was in charge of checking the CCTV cameras and had previously gone to relieve himself, soon realized there had been some unrecognized activity on the farm in his absence. After going through the footage, he alerted Norman, and the pair quickly sprang to action, racing out to their bike to give the thieves a chase. In no time, they arrived at the home of the eggs thieves, and they proceeded to ring the bell after giving the car parked in the driveway a quick inspection. Just as they had expected, the car was still hot from the journey, and they could see movement inside the house through the shielded windows. The egg snatchers looked shocked and embarrassed as they opened the door to the owners of Dunn's farm, who demanded they return what they had stolen. The thieves looked humiliated as they handed over the stolen eggs and potatoes and pleaded for forgiveness. Their faces turned a deep shade of crimson in shame as they were asked to pay for the goods they had already consumed while they returned the ones that were still in their possession. After making their way back home, one of the owners posted the footage from both the CCTV camera and the video they made while at the thieves' house to their social media accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Facebook. Attached to the clips was a statement addressing the thieves' actions, calling it an addition to the wall of shame. It was also tagged as the reason there would have been no eggs left for anyone else. Stay tuned, because this next part is sure to keep you glued to your screens. Farmer fires shots at Farm Invaders Getaway van. Gardaí have launched a manhunt for 2 members of a County Mayo burglary gang after a farmer fired 2 shots at their getaway van. The photograph uploaded to social media by the authorities shows a bullet hole was left in the bonnet of the silver Volkswagen van after the enraged man opened fire on Thursday afternoon. The 62-year-old farmer fired 2 shots at the van after he had earlier discovered 2 burglars ransacking his home. According to reports on the incident, the farmer was recorded to have proclaimed, "Enough is enough," after criminals repeatedly raided his home 3 times in the space of a year. Following the shooting, Gardaí called to the farmer's home and seized a shotgun and ammunition as part of the investigation. But the Sunday World can reveal that Gardaí have also launched a hunt for the burglars and have identified 2 suspects, who are both from County Mayo and are well known to Gardaí and have both appeared before the courts in recent years. It doesn't end there. The duo, who are related, are believed to have staked out several homes before breaking into the farmer's property. After the farmer opened fire, the 2 men abandoned the gray van and were seen fleeing across fields near the farmer's home. The suspects had been at the back of the van when the shots were fired, where they were trying to load chainsaws, pots, and other stolen items. They were not injured when the shots were fired, but it caused them to panic and flee the scene. Earlier, the farmer had noticed one of the suspects at the side of the property in which his late father previously lived. After this happened, he made an emergency phone call to the Gardaí police station and told the operator that he had discharged his firearm, which led to a major response from armed Gardaí, who rushed to the scene and were there within 25 minutes. In the meantime, the van had been abandoned after it broke down about a kilometer away. To everyone's surprise, one of the suspects had called a Gardaí station in County Mayo, using his own name to report the vehicle as stolen before he and his accomplice fled. The farmer, who lives on his own, is said to have been sick and tired, as well as frightened of criminals targeting his property. In recent weeks and months, rural parts of Mayo and Galway had been raided by burglary gangs targeting farmers and their farm equipments. Farmers like the old man who pleaded to be kept anonymous had started to set up defenses around their farmland to give themselves a fighting chance against the burglars. The need to be able to stand up against these thieves was what pushed the man to acquire a firearm, and according to his statement, he didn't hesitate to use it when he felt threatened by the burglars. Keep watching, there's more to come. Alberta farmer fires at farm invaders. An Alberta farmer who shot a man stealing his all-terrain vehicle will not spend any time behind bars. In the early hours of the day the farm invasion happened, Brian Knight found 3 men in his farmyard near Thieves, about 40 kilometers northeast of Red Deer. He jumped out of bed and chased a man who was riding away on his all-terrain vehicle. Knight rammed the ATV with his car, and when the man took off on foot, Knight pulled out a shotgun, firing 2 rounds at him. The culprit was eventually found with non-life-threatening injuries after Knight called friends and family to help look for him. After the authorities arrived at the scene, Knight was apprehended and arrested for attempted murder, even though the men had been intruders on his farm and he had been right to react. But that's not where things ended. According to the justices, Knight's arrest was issued not from his attempt to apprehend the thief, but rather from his reckless use of a firearm to achieve that purpose. The justices took issue with the characterization of Knight as a vigilante. They said his degree of responsibility should be measured against the speed of events, the fact that he was awakened in the middle of the night without warning, and the absence of any proof that Knight intended to do serious harm to the culprits. After meeting with the court on the issue, Knight was sentenced to 90 days in prison after he pleaded guilty to criminal negligence, but he successfully appealed that decision, and on Friday, the Alberta Court of Appeal granted him a suspended sentence. His original sentence was replaced with 3 months probation and 50 hours of community service. Farmers in the area applauded Knight for his bravery during the invasion and for making sure to stand up for himself against the thieves. The ATV was recovered, and to the delight of everyone who had heard about the invasion, Knight was officially awarded the title of vigilante by the people of Red Deer, Alberta. Luckily for Knight, after 3 months of serving his sentence, he was able to go back to his farm and resume his day-to-day activities. Thieves stayed clear of his land after the incident, and that year, he was able to record the highest crop yield and farm produce sales in the history of his farm. Using his experience as an example, Knight went forward to urge other farmers to stand up for themselves regardless of the circumstances and fight for what belongs to them. With farmers taking the initiative to fend off thieves and farm invaders without waiting for the authorities, the enigmatic stone spheres of Costa Rica.
Today we visit one of the strangest mysteries in all of archaeology, the stone spheres of Costa Rica.
Over 300 mysterious stone spheres, some as wide as 7 feet, dot the southern landscape of Costa Rica. Nobody knows how or why they were made. Crafted from solid rock, experts think ancient people used smaller stones to chisel them, but their purpose is still strange. However, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only mystery which will astound you on our list. The Kentucky meat shower. Yes, you heard that right. In 1876, chunks of meat fell from the sky in Kentucky. Scientists later identified it as lung tissue, likely from vultures vomiting mid-flight. Gross but fascinating, this remains one of nature's weirdest events. The swimming stone whales. In northeast Thailand, the mystery of 3 massive rocks looking like a family of whales swimming through the forest continues to attract people. Well, they're called the 3 whale rocks, and are actually sandstone formations over 75 million years old, created by the Earth's crust pushing rock upward. A dinosaur frozen in time. In 2011, miners in Canada uncovered a 110-million-year-old dinosaur that looked like it had just fallen asleep. Weighing 3,000 pounds and stretching 18 feet, this nodosaur was so well preserved it still had its spiky armor and camouflage-like scales intact. Scientists are still marveling at its lifelike state, calling it one of the most extraordinary fossil discoveries ever. The world's most mysterious book. Discovered in 1912, the Voynich manuscript is a bizarre document filled with alien-looking plants, strange zodiac symbols, and an uncrackable language. No one knows who wrote it or why, and here's the twist. Many of the plants don't match anything we know on Earth. It's like the manuscript was plucked straight from another dimension. The lost treasures of the Caucasus Mountains. Hidden deep in the Caucasus Mountains are ancient megalithic structures untouched by time. These stone houses were built with mysterious plugs to seal their entrances and are filled with jewelry, bronze tools, and pottery. Similar formations have been found across the globe, but their origins is still confusing. The disappearance of the Indus Valley Civilization. The Harappan civilization mysteriously vanished 4,000 years ago. Was it climate change, invasion, or disease? Their advanced cities with drainage systems still baffle archaeologists. Could their end warn us about our future? The ghostly Sargasso Sea. The Sargasso Sea has swallowed countless ships. Whirlpools and underwater tornadoes are suspected culprits, but why do entire crews disappear without a trace? The glass pyramid's hidden history. Did you know the iconic glass pyramid at the Louvre hasn't always stood there? This architectural marvel was added in 1989. Housing over 35,000 pieces of art, the museum now merges ancient history with modern design. The pyramid's transparency represents knowledge and mystery. So what treasures could still be undiscovered inside its walls? The ancient Greek computer. Over 2,000 years ago, a Greek ship sank, taking with it an invention way ahead of its time, the Antikythera mechanism. This ancient computer could predict eclipses, track the moon's phases, and even count down to special events. Here's the wild part. Nothing like it was built again until the 14th century. The untouched tomb of China's first emperor. China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, has a tomb so massive it hasn't been fully explored. Archaeologists plan to send robots inside to navigate the intricate tunnels and chambers, which are rumored to be filled with rivers of mercury. The full story of this tomb remains untold. The underwater pyramid of Japan. At the southern tip of Japan, 75 miles from Taiwan, a diver discovered what looks like a submerged pyramid. Some believe it's the ruins of an ancient underwater city, complete with carvings of people and animals. Is it a natural formation or a lost civilization? We still don't know. The mystery craters of England. On a quiet farm in England, a farmer stumbled upon craters that are 25 million years old. These pits have baffled geologists, who can't agree on how they formed. Were they made by meteor strikes, ancient gas explosions, or something else entirely? Ancient airplanes. The Kimbaya artifacts look eerily similar to modern airplanes, despite being thousands of years old. In 1994, scientists built larger replicas and discovered they were aerodynamically sound. Could these artifacts be blueprints for ancient flying machines?